So you've talked about your vision for Black on the Prairies, and you've talked a little bit about people who've reached out to you and said, "Hey, this is wonderful," and congratulated you on this resource. But I'm wondering if you could speak more to the reach and the impact that it's had so far. Um, and I'm wondering, Sarah, if you could speak to that. I know you talked about it being a resource that is used at the Museum for Human Rights, but what else do you know about the reach and the impact that it's had?
Talk about how far it went. Remember Maritimes? Don't forget that story.
Oh, wow.
So I will, I guess, start with, thinking about how, as a teacher, when I have a teacher's guide or when I'm using a teacher's guide, if I'm not comfortable with the material or I don't know it as well as maybe I should have invested the time in, we're all guilty of it. um, but there might be a moment where I don't know something as well. So I'm going to use it verbatim. Um, but I also might decide that these lessons could be a jump off point for me to learn a little bit more or have my students do some inquiry or collectively, holistically work as a class to learn a little bit more about something. And I had a friend of mine who teaches kindergarten, and I keep using kindergarten because it's like the area of least knowledge for me. Like they're so cute, they're so wonderful, but I'm afraid I'm going to step on one. So kindergarten is like a terrifying land. God bless kindergarten teachers. So when a friend of mine who teaches kindergarten was able to take the lessons that we made and adapt them even further for her 5-year-old learners, her 6-year-old learners, that's when I knew that this reach was actually getting to where it needed to go. It's helping, it's working. We're having students that as young as 5 and as old as 18 are engaging with this material, learning about themselves, learning about their peers. And it's across the country. Like Natasha mentioned, there are teachers from all over the country that have reached out to me to say, hey, I'm in this place and I want to use this lesson. I'm in the Maritimes. I'm up north. I'm on the West Coast. How can I incorporate the lesson on music? How can I incorporate the lesson on hair? It's mind-boggling to think that there are people reaching out and finding us, like a random DM from someone. I'm like, how did you get my name and number? What have I done? Like, please, I didn't do anything. But it's to say, no, I would really love to know, how would you use this in an 8th grade classroom, in a kindergarten, in a 12th grade genocide class? Where's the connections that I can make? As professionals, of course, we have to know our program of studies and understand and know, what are our outcomes? What are we teaching to? And that helps us to kind of shape the learning of our students. But for someone all the way in New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, to say, hey, I'm really curious about that lesson on hair. Would you mind helping me out with it? Absolutely. That's part of my role. That's part of my job. I like to use the phrase Google is free. Because sometimes some of that work can be taxing and sometimes that work can be a little bit hard. But for a resource like this that was made with so much just Black joy, yes, I would love to be the one to help you out. I'd love to be the one to further your knowledge so that when I say to you, Google is free, it's not that taxing labor that's harmful and triggering. It's you wanting to show up for your students. So to me, absolutely, I love that.
So I think it's also starting conversations between educators across the country as well, which is another huge impact. Natasha, do you want to add anything to what Sarah said about the reach and impact?
Yeah, I think the one thing she touched upon is we wanted to recognize with humility our limitations, that our wheelhouse was, as she said, upper elementary and mostly junior high. And so we both reached out to who we really admire in terms of educators and think of as master teachers, and talk to them and use them as soundboards to validate and to ensure that from their perspectives, whether it was lower elementary as low as kindergarten to as high as grade 12, that were we missing the mark? And there were things we did have to change. And so that was the homework, and that was the investment that we are willing to learn and invest in. And then one of the most exciting things for us, as Omayra knows, was permission to use the resource with the Calgary Catholic School District to be able to share that resource for free, not just to certain schools, but the entire district from K to 12. So knowing that resource was out there, it was on the main page of what we're doing work for anti-racism work, for diversity, through what we term the JEDI group, so the Education and Diversity and Inclusion group, and so that was a wonderful the work from Matt and Sawyer and from Lance Dixon and from Nintendo and obviously from Holly Shilley to allow us to have that opportunity to extend that reach, to share such a valuable resource and to see the value in the resource itself. That was a great honor to be a part of that. And so, of course, we thank them for seeing that. And of course, Omayra and her team for allowing us to share it in the first place. So yeah, just hearing even, from across the district, reaching out and asking about the resource, even my own VP saying, I printed this and there's so much and I'm overwhelmed. And I'm like, just start with one piece, start with something. I could see it here. I'm using it in my French. I'm running. So it was quite fascinating to feel the energy in the building and to know that vibration was being, a ripple effect throughout the district, thanks to, that team who also saw the value and had the vision to recognize how we could have the most impact.
Thank you, Natasha. So Cheryl and Omayra, just focusing specifically on the Black on the Prairies multimedia resources, and there's just such a wealth of them there. Can you speak to the reach and impact that they've had?
It's such an incredible question. So the project itself has had incredible impact. We heard from literally thousands of people across the country and overseas, like across the world. So it was different kind of reaction. So we heard from Black Prairie people saying, thank you so much. I feel really heard. I remember this young woman in Regina in her early 30s, late 20s, early 30s. And she reached out crying and said that she never thought in her lifetime that a project like this would exist. And she grew up in Regina. She said she had never felt so seen and so heard and so respected. With so much beauty. There was beauty in the project, and there continues to be, because it was so important to show the beauty in the Black experience on the prairies. And then we heard from non-Black Canadians all over the country saying that they were learning more about the country in ways that they didn't know before. And that was really important, that perspective that we were talking about earlier. And then we also heard from professors in universities who are now integrating the content into their university courses all across the country. So it's really been a remarkable thing. And the other impact is that other projects are now taking off because of the Black on the Prairies project. Other people in the prairies are, doing more work around Blackness on the prairies. We have brought the project into museums all across the prairies, into libraries all across the prairies, dozens and dozens of public libraries. so that people know that the project exists, that they can have content. I kept thinking of that 16-year-old girl who arrived from Niger in Saskatchewan in November in the dead of winter, knew nobody, and kept going to the library trying to find information and couldn't find anything. And what an impact that would have made in my life. And knowing that now it makes impact in other people's lives is really special.
Thank you, Omayra. Cheryl, do you want to add anything to what Omayra shared?
Yes, just very briefly. Of course, I heard from people across the country and the other women who were on the advisory board, who I would also like to say a shout out to. It was just such a pleasure being on that board, talking with those women. Heard a lot from them about the reach that they saw it having. I heard from people across the United States as well. But one of the conversations that I found most interesting that people were having as an impact from the project was about being Black and Indigenous, and being Black and mixed in ways that we don't usually think about. I've said this a million times, and I feel like I'm a broken record, but we always focus on the binary between Blackness and whiteness. But historically, we've had relationships with other racialized communities that were very interesting. And so that was something that was, that there was some beginning steps taken with Black on the Prairies to acknowledge that, and in particular, to look at our historic relationships with Indigenous communities. So that, I think, is an impact that I have heard people talking about more, and that I would hope would continue to have a greater, raise awareness of those relationships between racialized people that go back a very, very long way in this country.